Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Your parents. Can we hear a little bit more about your parents before you continue on? Because they seem like they might have been nice people.
Oh my gosh, I love both of them. Yes. They're amazing. My mom is like my best friend. She's actually in town right now. She's helping me put my house together. But
that's nice.
yes, and my dad, and they're both a lot of times a child with disabilities can really put a lot of tension on a family. And
sure.
I commend my parents because they had so much strength and so much love for her and for us, right? Because it's a lot. It's a lot that you're dealing with, and they really just cared for us. And I also had a live-in nanny. Her name was Beth, and she actually officiated our wedding. But and she served.
Oh yeah, I saw her in the video.
So she has known me since before I was even born. So it was really like a little power family that we had. And, it helps because it's just a lot going on, but my parents are amazing.
Yeah. Do they live in Colorado still?
No. So after my sister died, everything shifted. It's just a big difference, a big gap. You could feel it in the house, and everyone deals with grieving in a different way. And there's no right or wrong way. And there's no amount of time that, you can't just give people 3 weeks to deal with it. It's something that comes in different stages of life. And so, my parents had us, but it was also a big change, and a big change for my brother as her twin. And so he left and went to a college preparatory school or boarding school in Indiana by his choice. My brother's brilliant without trying. So that's where he went. I think he just needed a different path when she passed. And so we moved out to North Carolina right after that. And that was I was starting 7th grade. And so my parents were together until I was at the end of my freshman year of high school. And then my parents split. My dad is remarried and he's still in North Carolina.
Okay.
And then my mom lives in Boca Raton, but she's kind of bounced around. She lived in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore and a bunch of different places around that area.
Yes.
And then I ended up going to Florida after college. My grandmother lives there. I call her Graham Cracker, and I just adore her. And we have such a special relationship. And so I went there after college. And so my mom followed me to be close to us. And so she's still there with Graham.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
And you said the divorce happened when you were in 9th grade?
Yes.
Okay. And let's keep going with your story, because I know the divorce also had an impact on you.
Yeah. So divorce is never easy, and it's interesting now that I'm married and know more about relationships. Relationships are hard. And, I talk about this I have some single friends, and I'm always like, we live in a society where people marry for the wedding instead of marriage itself. And marriage it's amazing and it's very hard. And so it's interesting now to reflect on my parents' relationship and everything that they went through now that I starting to understand, marriage in itself and kind of what they went through together. And so they got divorced end of my freshman year. And then my dad remarried about 10 months later.
Okay.
His wife had a daughter as well, who was I think she's like a year and a half younger than I am, which is really interesting. We had always been a family, and now you're bringing in someone else. But I also was away. I went to the same boarding school my brother did. So I wasn't home for the separation, which I think had blessings in it because I didn't have to be part of that. I didn't have to choose between that. I was on my own and only had to worry about holidays and stuff. But yeah, it took a toll on me. And I was really angry for a long time. And just, I blamed my dad. And now that I'm older, I realize there are two sides to every story. And I totally think that like my parents are better as friends.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think they had a journey together that served them. They were supposed to be there for my sister Lexi. And, they're both really doing wonderful. And I think that, now it's interesting to see. But at the time, I just held a lot of anger. And I saw my mom hurting, and I hated that. I've always wanted to be the fixer, which is really interesting as a coach because you cannot be the fixer. But my whole life, like if people are suffering, I will do whatever it takes at the expense of myself to help you. And so when I saw my mom just in pain. And obviously my dad, I took it out on my dad because he had a wife, right? So I felt like he was just forgetting about us.
Yeah.
And she had a daughter that lived at home. So it kind of felt like, I wasn't welcome. And right, this is my own story, right? My dad never said this. My dad's a wonderful person, but when life happens and when bad things happen, we all create stories in our head. And these stories that we tell ourselves define our lives. And you have the choice what story you make, and that is going to carry. And you can either keep adding to the story or you can change the story at any time. So,
and on the divorce, was the most painful thing that you saw your mom was in pain and that hurt you? Was it that your parents who you thought loved each other and would always be together are no longer together? Is it that one or both has a new partner? Or is it that now you have a sibling that you weren't, air quotes, supposed to have? Like, what parts of all that was the most painful for you?
everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I think that's why it took such a toll on me, because it just was a stacking of things. And I talk about this too, like when something happens in life, it's going to serve you most if you look at that one thing, but it's easy for us to start stacking everything on top. And that's when it feels insurmountable. That's when it feels like you can't do anything. And so I think it was everything, honestly. And it was so much that I didn't understand. And I was so young that I was still kind of trying to figure out my sister being gone. And as I was getting older and starting to outlive her and realizing I was doing things that she never did, was really hard. And then, I just felt like, I think home has always been really important to me. I'm a Cancer, and Cancers are really big with home, and that has been. And so I think for the first time, I didn't feel like I had a home, because I didn't feel welcome in my dad's new family unit. And quite honestly, I didn't want to be part of it, because I was just angry. And my brother was kind of doing his own thing. And my mom was going through her process of not only losing her daughter, but then her marriage ending, and then who is she now?
Yeah.
And that comes with its own interesting exploration.
Yep.
And I think I was angry that I had a new sibling, because it felt to me that it was replacing my sister, I think. And so I think it was just too much too soon. And no one, people don't talk about the dark stuff, right? Dark stuff makes people uncomfortable. Death makes people uncomfortable. And I think a lot of people who knew me up until about 2 years ago, before I posted something, didn't even know I had lost a sister. And it's not something that I withheld, but it's also something that like you tell people like, oh yeah, I had a sister and she passed away, and you hear the room, it's like,
sure,
people don't know what to do.
Yep.
And so I think that, and then my parents' divorce, like I didn't have anyone to talk to, I was just trying to figure out how to deal with my own grief without having a way to deal with it. I couldn't burden my parents with it. I didn't know who to talk to. And so I just was kind of lost in my own world. And I think that's what led to my eating disorder. Was because it was the one thing in my life that I could control.
Sure.
And it was the only time that I could breathe. I was bulimic for a little while, and then it kind of switched from there. But when I would eat, when you eat, you breathe, which is why people in this society are so addicted to food, because we walk around not breathing all the time. Like everyone holds your breath, you're always tense. But when you breathe, or when you eat, you start to breathe. Your stomach can, fill, and you start to slow down. Same thing with smoking a cigarette, right? Like if you start to smoke a cigarette, you're breathing. That's how you do it. So it's all these things that we're addicted to that make us breathe. So really, breath is the key.
That's interesting. Let's come back to that. But first, the divorce. So you said 9th grade. So you're how old roughly? I
think I was 13 at the time.
Okay, so
13
you're
or 14.
young teen.
Yeah.
So I lost my dad to cancer when I was 10, and my mom raised us by herself, us 4 kids, and she did a great job. She's a very strong woman, which of course that's traumatic and difficult in its own right. Yeah. Now, the thing though that does seem extremely difficult is your situation where the mother and father split. Dad gets remarried. There's a new sister in the home. And it seems like when you see these things kind of play out in, I don't know, like I'm just picturing, I feel like I've seen this story kind of play out in certain movies or a TV show or something where it's like a narrative there where you can just, like the person there is, you feel like there's no, like everyone's left you basically. Mm-hmm. Like it just seems like an extremely difficult situation to work through as a 13-year-old. Extremely difficult.
Yep.
The thing about, I guess, a death, you take suicide away, because that would just seem very, I know that's very traumatic for kids, because they also internalize that
100%.
So it may be a little different and hopefully not as extreme way, but when a divorce like this happens, do the kids also internalize some of it? Like, well, what did we do wrong? What did, like, you feel like did you feel like you were contributed to the cause at all?
Yeah.
And then there's no one that is here for you. There's no one that can understand. It just seems extremely difficult situation.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that, because that was, I love to identify stories that I've carried throughout my life and that kind of have played out. And one thing that I always thought was that everybody I love leaves me.
I think that too.
Yeah.
I think everything that is good either will leave or die. That's what I think.
Yeah. And the scary thing about that is you can start to attract that if you see it, because whether you're making it happen, right? Like I had that fear in that story. And then I would sometimes try and keep relationships alive so much that I would push people away. And
so you would try to keep it alive so hard that you would push it away?
Yep.
So I would tend to, if the relationship's really has a chance of getting deep, I would tend to sort of tap out early. And I'll still be friends, but I'll hold them at a little bit more arm's length. Yeah.
And it's emotionally, I held them at an arm's length, but I would do acts of service, I would say, to keep it, like if you need something, I'll go get you food, or like show up in that way. But emotionally, I kept people. I mean, like my dating life, I never got close in relationships growing, all throughout high school and mostly through college too. I always kept people where I could see them and, never really tried to go into anything too deep. But, I think, that story of everything that I love leaves me, you can look at that in two ways and think like you did it, or maybe it's a way of setting things free that no longer serve you, because sometimes you're not supposed to keep things for forever. Right. And so just because it's good now, maybe it's not always going to be good for you. So maybe it is a blessing that it does go away because it's not serving you any longer. Yes. But you can also look at it thinking everything I love leaves me. So I'm not going to invest myself in love, relationships, anything, and you can keep that arm's length. But then what do you miss out on when you do that?
Yes. Do you mind sharing how old you are now, roughly?
Yeah, I'm 27.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you still feel like that do you still believe that everything that you love will leave you?
No.
Okay.
Nope. And that's something I had to do a lot of work on. But no, I don't believe that anymore. And and if I really truly believe, there's a quote that I love and I forget who said it, so I hate saying it, but we'll have to look it up and see. But it says, "I respect myself enough to walk away from anyone or anything that no longer serves me or makes me happy." And I love that. And because it's so true. And so I have now an outlook that if a friendship is dwindling or an opportunity goes away, then it wasn't meant to be. And it's not for my highest good, because I believe that what's meant for me will never miss me, and what misses me was never meant for me. It's another quote. I don't know who said it, which we'll have to Google, but both of those things, because I fully trust that if it's meant for me, whether it's a relationship or an opportunity, whatever it may be, if it's for me, I'm going to hit it head on.
Yes.
And if it's not, or if it leaves my life, then I respect that, because I know if it's meant to be, it'll come back, right? Like my husband, because we split up for a year, dated other people, and he still came back. And the way I just trust that things are going to find me again. And I find that serves me so much better. And it's a path that you are on every day of, like, if something happens, you have to correct yourself and think you can't go back to that old story, because it's so easy to assume the negative story and it's so easy to go there. And so it's learning how to catch yourself in the middle of labeling an event that happens and doing it in a way that's going to serve you and help you.
Yes. Yeah. I love that way of looking at it. What's meant for you won't miss you, and what misses you wasn't meant for you.
Yes.
Because, I mean, Andrew and I were just talking about this earlier today. Like, the sovereignty of God in all things is like, that's the one thing that we have to come back to, Yes. And God doesn't make mistakes.
He doesn't. And he fulfills his promises.
Yeah, and he does fulfill his promises. And man, that's like the ultimate, like that's like the ultimate foundation there. And so when life does get wonky and things get out of out of control and certainly feel like they're out of control and so forth, that is sort of the that's the thing you can come back to.
Yeah.
You know, like it's
and because if we're never in control, and so I like everything that's happened over the last couple of months, I think it's just like reminded us that even though we think we're in control, we're not. But what I love too is that God always fulfills his promises and he's faithful, but it doesn't always look like what we think it will. Yeah. And so it's easy to get caught up in your own story and your own disappointment when really like he's always going to do what's right for you and he knows you, right? And so if you think negative, then you're going to miss out on what he's trying to show you.
Yes.
And so if you trust in him and you fully trust that he's going to show up, it might look totally different and it might mean removing someone or something from your life, but he's always going to put something better in its place.
Yeah. That's a good word.